call on Government Order of the Day number 7.
Wildlife Powers Amendment Bill, second reading.
The Honourable Maggie Berry.
I move that the Wildlife Powers Amendment Bill be now read a second time. Mr. Speaker, I am very pleased to be able to rise and take the first call for the second reading of the Wildlife Powers Amendment Bill. I acknowledge the work of the Select Committee, chaired by my colleague Scott Simpson, the intellectual rigour that they brought to the process, the thorough nature of the approach that they took in examining all the details, and their recommendations have added value to the bill, and I think rigorously tested its parameters in a way that means that nature will be better protected. I will speak on those measures shortly, but first I think it would be useful to explain to the House and the wider public the context and the purpose of this bill. Our native wildlife face many threats. Introduced predators, the usual suspects, rats, stoats and possums, are destroying our biodiversity. Our government's response to that has been to announce the visionary target of predator-free 2050, and our Prime Minister is right behind it, as is our entire caucus. I think too the people of New Zealand have realised that our threatened species need better protection. Weeds are also a very big threat to our biodiversity. They smother habitat and food sources, they cause disease, and they cause a range of problems. Hence the policies that I've brought in around the war on weeds and naming the dirty dozen and putting many millions of dollars, some of which I'll be announcing tomorrow, around wilding pine control and other measures, because we acknowledge that our plants, as well as our precious taonga species, are under threat. Poaching is a very real threat, and at times it can be overlooked. We have to face the reality, though, that it is a growing problem. There's a lucrative international black market in our native species, our spectacular geckos and skinks, and that drives some people to break the law, to seek to take advantage of our country's remarkable wildlife. This can and does pose a major threat to their security. For example, reptile smugglers tend to target pregnant females, which is a real problem for the small fragmented populations that breed very slowly. We know of one gecko population on the Otago Peninsula, for example, driven almost to extinction by smugglers, and another population where poachers took almost half the breeding females. My colleague Jackie Dean's excellent Members' Bill, Natural Heritage Protection, passed in 2013, and that increased and standardised the penalties for offences against protected wildlife, with fines of up to $300,000. It was designed to deter and to punish smugglers, as this Wildlife Powers Amendment Bill is. Dealing specifically with the problems of illegal hunting is important and at the heart of this bill. Over the past few years, people have killed whio, tui, kereru, kia, kaka, shags, petrels, oyster catchers and herons, and tried to sell blue duck chicks. Hunters and domestic dogs have killed kiwi, gulls and weka. This Wildlife Act protects our unique taonga species from being illegally taken, hunted, killed or smuggled out of New Zealand. But its enforcement powers that were given to dock rangers have not been updated for 60 years and are no longer fit for purpose when our threatened taonga species are so in danger. Some of the language in the old bill is outdated. I've referred before to how it specifies that only men can be enlisted to help rangers. But more broadly, the powers themselves need to be expanded and clarified to fit modern times and the threats that our biodiversity and our ecology faces. The purpose of the Wildlife Powers Amendment Bill is to better protect wildlife by modernising the protection and enforcement powers available to investigate and prosecute offences against protected wildlife. The bill only affects the Wildlife Act and only changes enforcement powers. It does not change the protected status of wildlife or how wildlife is managed. The current training given to rangers covers the ground, and making these minor changes to the Act will not impact on DOC's budget. It will, though, give full-time rangers 4 new powers: the ability to take action to prevent an offence about to occur or in progress, or to stop offending in progress, which will potentially enable rangers to prevent or minimise the harm to wildlife. In other words, they can act in a timely fashion to intervene before a crime is committed. Temporarily, they can stop persons suspected of an offence to allow investigation. This can be very important in situations where an offender is trying to evade the rangers or to hide evidence of the offending. It will also enable our rangers to seize a broader range of evidence, such as laptops, cameras and mobile phones. This can help build a case or to prove intent, for example, whether an offence is commercially motivated. Also, they will have additional powers requiring proof of identification details from suspected offenders, specifically their date of birth and evidence of their identity. This will support rangers to get information that is legally required before a person can be charged. In addition, this bill grants a power to arrest. That's limited to very serious offending against absolutely protected wildlife, such as that involving illegal hunting, killing or export. Access to that power of arrest is also very limited to full-time dock rangers who are specifically warranted to use it. That is a very small team of highly trained specialists. Many of them are former policemen. This will most likely be used for the serious offences that I referred to earlier, such as international smuggling, because these can pose significant risks to absolutely protected wildlife, such as our native lizards, and the suspected offenders are a potential flight risk. I welcome the Select Committee report on the bill and the 14 tweaks and adjustments that they recommended to it, 12 from DOC and 2 from the Select Committee, all of which have been adopted. They have clarified the nature and extent of the new powers and their relationship with existing provisions in the Act. The new section, 39AA, specifies which rangers will have access to the powers to seize evidential material, require people to stop and intervene to prevent offences. Section 39AA clarifies that these powers are available to DOC full-time rangers, specifically those that are warranted and trained in enforcement work, also to police officers and to fishery officers as well. They are not available to DOC honorary rangers or honorary fishing officers or to any honorary fish and game rangers. There was and there is a very simple reason why this was the case. Honorary rangers are at arm's length from the government. They are not public servants or subject to the Public Service Code of Conduct, which binds DOC and other full-time Crown staff that are employed by the Crown and under obligation, and transparency and accountability are very important parts of the rigour of this process. The Select Committee also clarified the safeguards around some of the powers. Any evidence seized must relate to the investigation of a suspected offence. The power to stop a person may only be exercised in relation to a suspected offence and does not enable the use of force. The person may also be stopped only for a time that is reasonable in the circumstances. The committee replaced the existing Section 40 in the Act to clarify the types of behaviour that constitute obstructing a person acting under the Wildlife Act. The changes to this section take account of the new powers. The committee further amended the new Section 66A to make it clearer who can require what types of identification information from suspected offenders. The committee extended the ability to require suspected offenders to provide their date of birth to full-time fish and game rangers. That is, I think, appropriate for the level of offending that they are generally dealing with when they are managing game bird hunting under the Act. The full-time fish and game rangers do an excellent job, as do the DOC full-time rangers, and I commend them all on the great work that they do and the sincerity and the, frankly, heroic nature of the work that they sometimes do in the field. They are out in the front line of conservation day in, day out, sustaining the very essence of our New Zealand identity. Our DOC rangers maintain the tracks, the huts, the reserves, the special places and landscapes that we all enjoy so much, including visitors to this country. They make our nation famous to the world, and they keep the standards high, and they care. They also protect our native species in the heat of the summer, the cold of the winter, and the driving wind and gales, which sometimes seems to come in every season and are very difficult for the young fledgling chicks to survive. Our DOC rangers are there every step of the way. They do that work in the face of often ill-informed and vicious abuse from the likes of the anti-1080 lobby. So the fortitude and the stamina of the DOC staff, I take this opportunity in the House with this bill to commend. This bill is a small but vital way to help make their work a little bit easier and to help them be even more effective in protecting our national monuments, which are our national taonga, from poachers. I commend the work of the DOC full-time rangers, the Fish and Game full-time rangers, and I commend this Wildlife Powers Bill to the House.